Hi, I'm Simon. Thanks for tuning in to watch The Ordinary Filmmaker. It's Friday, September the 10th, 2021. Kind of makes you wonder where the year's gone. But the good news is, after a long year of very little news, we have a lot of news to cover this week. Let me show you the news that we're going to cover today, and if you can't watch this entire 2-hour live stream, well then feel free to tune in later. I'm going to be cutting up this video after it's published and putting out separate videos so you can watch stories that interest you and only those stories. All right, so let's take a brief look at all the news that we're going to cover today. The Canon R3, we now have pricing for US and Euros. We have updated specs on the SONY a7 IV, and I'm really liking some of the specs we got on the SONY a7 IV here. It's going to give the Canon R5 a little bit of a run for its money. We also have SEPA numbers. We have the Canon EOS RA, production shortage. We have a camera registered with OM Digital. Is it going to be that Wow camera? And as far as lenses go, we've got a lot here tonight. We've got from Sony, Canon, Sigma, the L-Mount Alliance, Nikon, and of course there's an Apple event coming up next week. Will we see any video equipment? And of course I've got a small correction concerning a mistake we made with DJI last week, but it happens when you're talking about rumors. But before I get into each of these stories and we get in depth with our panel, let me introduce our panel. Returning with us again is Brian Weiss. Brian, thanks for joining us again tonight.
Hey, Simon, how's it going? Thank you for asking me back.
Well, I'm glad to have you back. Anything you care to share with us about what's going on with your channel or news or life in general?
Oh, sure. The podcast is going really well. We are having some pretty amazing guests. Tali Roden, a stunt woman, is going to be our guest. That's going to be premiering soon. And we've got a lot of fun stuff we're talking about. The Expressions, the podcast is the name of it. If anybody's interested, check it out.
Well, you know what? Do me a favor, put it in the comment section so people can see it. And then after this video, send me an email and I'll make sure it's in the comment section or in the description of this video as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And returning for a second time, John Drummond from New York State. John, how are you this week?
I'm good. How you doing? I'm glad to be back. I'm glad that you asked me back again. So this should be fun.
It should be, especially, it feels a little bit deja vu. I feel like the cat in the Matrix just went by twice. For those of you just watching, we actually started broadcasting live on time at 8 o'clock, but I forgot to press that Go Live button. Thankfully, we only wasted 2 minutes. John, do you want to care to share anything about your channel and what kind of videos that you do?
Well, certainly. I mean, I'm pretty new to video. Actually, I've been an amateur photographer. I mean, I'm one of the, I guess, the amateur in the room right now. But I'm trying to get as good as I can. I retired from over almost 40 years in federal government, and really dove into first photography, and then within the last year into video. So I launched my own channel focusing on nature photography, mostly landscapes, but also occasionally wildlife. I live and work in New York City, actually. So most of my shooting, actually some of my shooting is actually within the city limits, and certainly within an hour's drive. And it's one of the points of my channel is to kind of show how much available nature there is to shoot within pretty much anywhere you live, no matter where you live. So my channel is under my own name, John Drummond. I'll put a comment in the comments in the chat, and you can follow my adventures going forward. I just cracked 650 followers, which is not a lot, but over a course of a year and change, it's not too bad. So
well, that's awesome. We'll see if we can't get you up to 1,000 subscribers soon.
Oh, absolutely.
And last but certainly
you.
not least, we have James returning from us from James Jackson Films. How are you doing, James?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me back, man. I'm always enjoy these little conversations we have. Let's get into it.
Yeah, no, I love it too. And do you want to do a quick blurb on your channel and the type of content you produce?
Sure. So I'm mainly focused on film and video. I do a lot of news coverage as well as do reviews on video cameras, lenses, different types of filmmaking equipments, and I also do tutorials and tips as well. So if that's something you guys are interested in, the channel is James Jackson Films. I'm always looking for new people to join up and help build this community.
All right, thank you very much. Now, again, for you, those of you watching, you might notice that I'm not always looking at you directly through the camera, and that's because I'm controlling everything here. I'm ensuring that all the slides and everything is showing properly. And if I decide that every now and then I want to change the angle like I am doing right here, I have to look down at my screen. I haven't quite figured a way of doing that where I can still maintain contact. But most importantly, this is a collaborative effort. I've got 3 guests to help dig or take a deep dive into these stories and provide more information than just my viewpoint. It's the same view, but multiple angles, I think, provides a bit more of an interesting story, a bit more interesting coverage. But there's also your viewpoint too, and through the comments in this, please, if you've got any questions, post them. I'll do my best to cover as many of them as I can. So for our next story, for example, is going to be on the Canon EOS R3. I'm going to focus on showing the comments related to the R3, and I'll do the same as we go through the Sony as well. And as always, if you do a super chat, those do get prioritized. And if you do a super chat, then feel free to load it up with a question for any one of the particular panelists, and I'll make sure that they are aware of it. But now, let's go ahead and get to our first story. The Canon EOS R3 isn't necessarily the most anticipated camera of the year, but it's definitely one that's got people wondering, especially if you happen to own a Canon 1DX Mark II, or you recently upgraded to the Canon 1DX Mark III. Canon Hong Kong put out an announcement of sorts. We have an announcement on September the 14th for the R3 and a couple of lenses. Now, the announcement doesn't really say what it's going to be covering, but we know from various stories on Canon Rumors from Craig that are CR2 that this is going to be, well, it's the least kept secret. As far as shipment on this camera, this is what we have as new. The shipment is going to be November. And again, that could change. Anything can happen in 2021, as we've seen with the chip shortage. But we're expecting a November shipment. That's planned right now. And the price, 6,999 euros or 5,999 US dollars. So that puts it at about $500 less. $500 less than the 1DX Mark III. And let me show you the specs there we have on this one here. So these are the specs that we have on the Canon R3. You can see that it's got a 24 megapixel full frame back illuminated sensor. That's really a first for Canon. It's 30 frames per second electronic shutter. And I know many are comparing it to the Sony Alpha 1, which has 50 megapixel. That's right, 50 megapixel sensor. I was going to say 50 frames per second, but no, it's 30 frames per second at 50 megapixels. And of course, the Alpha 1 has better video, but the R3 does provide oversampled 4K. So we got a lot of really great specs here. And what I see this as is this is kind of a mirrorless version of the 1DX Mark III. It becomes what I would call the acting flagship camera, because in many ways it's better than honestly, it's better than the 1DX Mark III in almost area. Well, I know there is one area where it's lacking to many people. It doesn't have dual CF Express cards. But if you look at capability versus capability between the two cameras, the R3 is an upgrade over the 1DX Mark III. And we were looking at 30 frames per second electronic, where I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, the 1DX Mark III, what was it? What did it top out? Was it 16 frames per second electronic and 14 mechanical?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And of course,
the nice and fast. And to be fair, I mean, that is ridiculously fast. To shoot more than that, you're coming home with so many extra frames. For photography wise, I mean, for video, I'm sure it has its other benefits, but that's nuts fast. With that kind of resolution, unless you have terabytes and terabytes of backup drives, be selective with those frames. Don't just spray and pray. That'll be ridiculous.
Yeah, you're right. For anybody who shoots as a hobby, it's kind of the equivalent of having a fully automatic, high-powered rifle. You got to be careful how you use that thing. You don't just lay down on the trigger and shoot. You selectively burst.
Bullets. Yeah, massive bullets.
Yeah, and Brian, I've got the 100 millimeter, the Canon RF 100 millimeter f2.8, and I went shooting with that, and I put it in electronic mode where it's 20 frames per second. So I had to beef up my R5. In the CF Express card slot, I have a 2 terabyte CF Express card. And in the SD card slot, I have a 1 terabyte card. I can never remember the name of the company. I should go to the back of the camera and pull it out. But, the thing you learn with a high-speed camera is that you selectively burst. You just burst for a little bit because when I was out shooting the moon, when I was out shooting wildlife, I hold down that trigger sparingly, and I still came back with like 800 photos that I had to painstakingly go through.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
with that kind of resolution, I mean, that's file size.
Yeah, my iMac or my MacBook Air could only handle, I think, like opening 10 raw files at a time before it said, I'm done.
So it's safe to assume that this product is for a very niche customer.
Yeah, I would. Now, you're more of a, you'd probably be able to pick up on the use cases and the customers that would buy this, but I'm thinking anybody who's shooting sports, anybody that's shooting anything that's fast action, if you're shooting motorcycles, auto racing, I don't know, maybe even fashion photography. What do you? Where would you see this camera? Who do you think would buy this camera, Brian?
To be fair, I think most mirrorless cameras are most attractive for video function. For photo, at least in the sports world, they're very fast. And I'm just trying to think of my application. Like tomorrow, I'm shooting wrestling. Mm-hmm. And when you shoot wrestling, you shoot with both eyes open. And I'd like to get the opinion of the other guys on the panel here, but shooting with a mirrorless camera, when you have an electronic viewfinder here, and when you shoot with both eyes open, you have optical in the world here. By the end of a long day, for me at least, I've had a lot of issues with headaches and stuff like that because you're getting completely different stimulation. And now I know on the Nikon viewfinders, the refresh is extremely good and the Sonys are fantastic. I'd like to see the quality of the viewfinder on this, and I hope it's up to par, because if it is, then okay, it makes sense to go that way. But if you're going to be shooting both eyes open and you've got an EVF and an optical, it can become a real problem. And that's something that I've only learned through experience in doing it. Other than that, the person who I'd see using this camera would obviously be a professional, somebody, maybe a gynecologist with a good job, lots of money coming in.
I'm just nodding with this one, Brian. I don't want to dig too deep on that one.
Yeah,
if you're a professional, you're getting paid from a production company. What's that? Sorry, I missed all that.
Yeah,
I was just saying, if you're getting paid from a production company to buy the equipment, and they write that off like production companies do, then it's an amazing camera to go for. I don't see too many retail employees buying one right away. Let's just put it that way.
No, and I don't see it as a camera for me too. And this is where I'm glad you, at the last minute, James, said you could make it here tonight, because otherwise it would have been two photographers against one videographer. And, I look at this camera's video features and I think, it's decent. It's got oversampled 4K. It has Canon R3 and it can do internal raw video. But $6,000 when the R5 exceeds those specifications. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts, James?
The question is the overheating. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that's a big point.
That's a big credit. That's a big point.
Yeah. To some, the overheating on the R5 was never a big deal for me, but I know everybody's experience is different. Yeah. For me, from a video perspective, I think this is, the 1DX series was always great. It was a great video camera. A lot of people started their video, at least a lot of people professionally that, especially we know in this YouTube community, had a lot of their big successes on the 1DX series. And this sort of just continues what
Peter McKinnon,
the 1DX Mark III did in terms of the raw video recordings. With that one was like, I think it was like 5.5K. This one I think is like 5.9K. So really it's kind of like 6. So it's really 6K. I think it's a solid thing in terms of, I think, because you asked the question, who is this for? I look at this as the journalism, the journalists, people who need to go get their photos but want to quickly switch and grab some video footage, some great solid video footage that they can deliver as well. All the video, it's got Canon R3. It's got a lot of good, it's got obviously raw recording. You can oversample 4K. For people that may maybe looking at the R5 and may want to shoot raw, but didn't want to deal with the 8K, files, 5K is a lot 6K files are a lot easier. They're still a little bit heavy, but they're nowhere near as heavy as 8K. I think I personally say the price. The thing with the price is what kind of throws it off, because I'm looking at the comments and everybody's sort of like $6,000, which, if you go by just what they did with their DSLRs, it's not surprising. It's right in that ballpark of the 1DX Mark III, which was $6,500. I think the question is, what is the R1 going to be like? That's the thing. What's the price of the R1 if this one is $6,000?
I got to jump in there because I think you hit it on the head, because I'm thinking the same thing. So this is $500 less than the 1DX Mark III. But you see, I know, because I know how Canon works, and they've been doing this for decades. Canon has a certain way they look at their cameras. They understand exactly who the camera is marketed for. And the R1 has, so I shouldn't say the R1, the 1 series has always been better than the 3 series or the 5 series or any other camera in their lineup when it comes to both video and stills. So it's going to be a better performer than the R1. It's probably going to hit 50 frames per second. It's probably going to have a 45 megapixel to somewhere around 50 or 55 megapixels. I don't see it going higher than that. And of course, video, I see it probably having the same resolutions as the R5. So it'll have 8K RAW, it'll have 4K oversample. But what they'll probably do is eliminate the overheat times. Maybe they'll give us different frame rates on 8K. Maybe they'll give us 8K 60 frames per second.
2 CF Express cards, I see that happening, because the R1 is going to be the flagship camera. Someone asked, it's like, did they use the sensor from Sony? Canon makes all their sensors. They're one of the few camera companies that actually builds their own sensors along with Sony. So this is directly from Canon themselves. But yeah, I'm intrigued, but I still think, if I'm looking at in terms of video, if I'm looking just purely from video, the C70 is $500 less, and it's a true video camera. It's Super 35, but you throw, the price that you would pay for that, you can throw a focal reducer on there, and you've got not only a full frame field of view, but you got built-in NDs and all these professional video assist features. There's just too much still lacking from a video perspective. Yes. Because at the end of the day, it's still going to be a hybrid camera, so there's only so much that this can go.
James, I think you hit it on the head when you said that this is for photojournalists, and maybe the Associated Press, after switching over to Sony, might go like, this is a camera we've been waiting for a long time. This is a camera that's going to give you all the stills you need. But then if you need to capture video that's good enough to air on broadcast television, you've got decent video as well. But now I want to open things up for you in the audience too, because Orlando just said that this is going to be $8,000, but I'll remind you, a lot of people said the same thing about the R5, that it was going to be $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, and then it came in at $3,899, and of course everybody said that was too much. So
I think he's talking about the R1.
I do.
Not the
yes, sorry, the R1. I do think the R1 is going to cost more than the 1DX Mark III, but I don't think it's going to be exceedingly high. But John, you've been awfully silent on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to just jump in because you guys were having a lot of good points. I mean, certainly from a photography perspective, I look at the R3 as really a photography beast, especially for fast action shooting such as sports, wildlife, birds particularly, photojournalism, press events, things like that. Maybe even, maybe weddings and such also. There's a couple of features that you didn't mention, like the eye control autofocus. I don't think you mentioned that.
I didn't.
And and if that works correctly, that could be very huge. I mean, I know they had some beta models out during the Olympics. I really hadn't heard about them in terms of how they performed. I'm sure as the announcement actually comes, then you'll have some demos of how it actually works. That'll be very interesting. I mean, the other thing, of course, that will be interesting is the presence of rolling shutter or lack thereof, especially with the electronic shutter. I mean, at 30 frames a second, it could be amazing, but it could also have significant rolling shutter. I mean,
I don't think it will.
Okay, well, I would hope not, because I don't think also, if you had mentioned whether it's going to have the same DigiX processor as the R5 and R6, or if it's going to have an upgraded processor also, because you have to have tremendously fast readout in order to avoid having rolling shutter. So like I said, the R5 has some, but not as much as some other models. But on the other hand, of course, you have the Alpha 1, which has almost none. Price wise, the R3 also kind of undercuts the Alpha 1 because I think it's at least $500 difference. Not to mention the Alpha 1 doesn't come with an extra, the vertical grip. You have like another $300 or $400 for that. So it does certainly undercut the Alpha 1 to some degree. So there's a lot of things that we know about the R3, and but obviously there's some other things that we really don't know and won't know until we get it in people's hands and really start seeing some reviews coming out, after the official launch. So I'm intrigued. It's more camera than I'll ever need, and definitely I think one of the things that in terms of nomenclature, there's been a lot of discussion about that. It does seem like when the Alpha 1 came up out of nowhere, it kind of caught Canon with his pants down. This might have been supposed to have been the R1, and they just decided, well, we have something better maybe that was going to be an R1 Mark II a year from now, but we'll just put this out called the R3 and make the real R1 come out next year. So it does lay the groundwork for a lot of interesting technology.
I'm going to poo-poo that a little bit, and the only reason why is, and all we have to do is look to the 1 series and the 5 series and how the 1 series has always had better video and better stills. Now, sometimes, like with the 1DX Mark II, the differences were very minor. You had 120 frames per second in 1080, but only 720 on the 5D Mark IV. And you had I believe, if I remember correctly, it was 4K 60 on the 1DX Mark II, but 4K 30 on the 5D Mark IV. Maybe I'm getting my cameras mixed up a little, but the differences were minor. So once they came out with the R5, those video features should easily have gone into the R1. So unless, of course, as you're saying, they had better video features planned for the R3 and they've toned it down a little bit. I mean, it's possible, but that's what I love about this panel. All the ideas we have of conjecture and all that wonderful stuff. So any final words?
I have just one additional point. I know that Brian had mentioned, I think I saw a comment also from Nick Can about the refresh rate and the EVF basically. Now I've got an R5 and an R6. And with the R5, which I do use to shoot birds, and you mentioned, Brian, about basically shooting with 2 eyes when shooting wrestling. I mean, I do that also in terms of bird spotting, especially when I'm looking for the bird. Although I tend to, since I'm very strongly right-eyed anyway, once I've locked onto the bird, the left eye really doesn't bother me. The R5 has a refresh rate in the EVF. I think it defaults to 120 hertz, and you can turn it down to less than that. But 120, I mean, it's really smooth and I'm an eyeglass wearer. I mean, I'm blind without it, so. It hasn't bothered me. I would think the R3 would be at least as good, if not better, in terms of refresh rate and having less strain on the eyes.
That's good feedback. I appreciate you letting me know about that because everyone's different, right? So it's good to get that differing opinion. I do want to mention, you mentioned about how Canon has the new eye detect autofocus, which I think
eye control autofocus. Yeah,
eye control. Minolta had that on their film cameras. I don't know if you remember, Minolta film cameras had the ability to you look and it would focus where you look. So I don't know if that's
the EOS 3 had that too.
Yeah, that was like 20 years ago, and I don't know how well it worked.
Basically they're trying to bring back that technology and sort of update it. So I'm guessing they've been working on it. They must have been working on it for quite some time now, and now I guess. They just decided now that they're going mirrorless, they're going to try to bring that back. I am curious to see how that works. Especially in situations like weddings and things, or weddings, even like fast-paced, like motorsports. But really, so things like wedding, it's like, how is that actually going to work? And also curious, what is the experience of photographers like you guys? How the experience of using something like that, where your eye is really controlling where that focus goes.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, it'll be great. If it does, on the other hand, between that and also having the eye detected autofocus, which of course the Canon cameras have a great one of those, I wonder if the two systems might fight each other to some degree, depending on what you're shooting, how many subjects there are. If the camera focuses on one thing because it's closer and you shift over to something else, will the camera follow you? I mean, the programming behind getting workable eye autofocus is it kind of, so I'm really intrigued to see how that particular facet of the camera works, because if it does, then that's something that down the road might trickle down to more of your mid-range bodies like R5 successor or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely going to try that out at a Birds of Prey workshop or shooting wrestling. I think those are two challenging situations. I should put those to the test. And I think it's interesting. Gaston, he says that he thinks camera companies are realizing that big, vast majority of their users are willing to pay higher prices. I agree. We are selling a lot of really expensive cameras. I've got an Alpha 1 going out on Thursday, and people seem to have the money to do it. So they've got amazing technology in cameras these days. They can do amazing things. You can shoot at ridiculous ISOs. Somebody commented, what's the low light like? I obviously can't tell you. But I tell you, with that many pixels, with the computer processing they have, I don't know. I'm a big fan of less pixels for low light. So I'm not really sure how these cameras are going to compare.
I mean, that's always been a common thought, but I've seen with some studies that indicate that maybe it may not be as, especially with the modern sensors and modern processors, that having smaller, larger pixels may not be as important for low light performance as it would have been maybe a few years ago. So I guess
saw that video.
The proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, I saw the video and I got very angry actually watching it. I don't know if it's the same thing you're talking about, John, but I saw a video where they were talking about how pixel size and pixel numbers don't really matter as much for low light. And I'm watching this thinking, okay, so this guy is basically asking me to forget physics. and that really annoyed me to no end. No, so
I think I've read that rather than a video, but
it's a mix. It's a mix. Overall, yes, the pixel size does matter. The photo sites does matter, but given the technology, it really comes down to how good the sensor is, and also how good the processors. The processors and the sensor.
The processors made a huge difference,
right?
And that's progressed.
The processor can make a huge difference. Because I think the A7 III is a perfect example, where it was a 24 megapixel, but if you compared it to the A7S III, which was a 12 megapixel. Even though it had more resolutions, typically means not as good in low light. It still was not as good as the A7S II, but it was close enough that people were able to offset because you were getting the higher resolution.
Well, there are lots of videos on this, and I can say from my experience when I bought the R5, I was very disappointed right away because I couldn't produce great videos with this camera. And the simple reason is I'd gone from a hobbyist camera like the 70D up to a professional camera where you have to understand the triangle. You have to understand how ISO works. You have to understand how exposure works. You have to understand how aperture works. And you have to you can't just work with the camera. You need things like monitors. You need lighting in certain situations. You really have to know an awful lot. And only now, if you watch my latest few videos when I've been out in the forest in really, really low light situations, are you seeing that I'm actually producing really good video, quality video that is what the camera is capable of? So a lot of times when we see some of these videos where they're comparing it, keep in mind too, it depends on whose hands the camera is in. Their skill and artistry is how they can produce really incredible effects. Even going back to cameras like Pentax. Pentax was a great innovator. They were the first to come out with the SLR, first with autofocus. And it takes the right technology at the right time and the right people to produce great results. So I know we could stay on the R3 for an awful lot of time here, but I know, look, we've got, I don't know why I've got so many people watching right now, 66 people watching, and I know some of you are waiting for the A7 IV. So I'm going to change.
Hit that like for everybody in the stream.
Thank you, James.
Everybody
like and subscribe.
That's Don. I see you in the chat, man. Thanks for joining.
And thanks for that shameless plug. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch gears now. Are you ready for this? We're going to talk about the Sony A7 IV. Now, the Sony A7 IV, it's been all over the internet for the last year. We've heard tons of rumors about it, but really there's been very little substance. We were hoping to get the A7 IV last year, but we ended up with the A7S III, a camera we hadn't seen updated in about 5 years. Well, lately there's been an awful lot of news coming out from Digital Camera World, Camera Labs, and many, many others, but they're all pointing to the same source, and that's Sony Alpha Rumors. So let me show you what we have here as an update from Sony Alpha Rumors. They're saying that we're looking at, and this is an update based on August the 29th, it is now going to be a 33 megapixel sensor. Again, these are rumors. We don't know if this is going to pan out, but the really big thing here, 7K oversampled 4K. Now we're going to get 5.5 stops of IBIS, and it's supposed to be coming in October. And we're going to talk about the lenses very shortly here. But 7K, that is very similar to what we get the R5. So the R5 does produce 8K, and I'm not going to discount 8K, because 8K, I'll tell you, it produces great results. And until you tried it out, you don't realize how powerful that is. But next to that, the R5 has produced better video than the A7S III because it has more detailed video when it takes that full sensor readout. 8K oversampled 4K, and I got to tell you, it is everything you would expect it to be. And the videos that I put out on this channel, you have no idea. If you actually saw the actual content shot in all I, 30 frames per second, 4K HQ, it's stunning. It's so much better than what you see on YouTube. So I'm so excited to see that the A7 IV is coming out with 7K oversampled 4K. Now, before we get to the lenses, I want to open up to the panel. And I know this is video, and I should go to James first, but I want to go to Brian. Brian, I was in your store a couple of years ago. I was looking at the A7 III, and I thought, oh, they're going to refresh this soon. I didn't think it was going to take as long as it did to refresh it. If these rumored specs are to be believed, what do you think of the A7 IV?
I think it's going to be killer. Anything Sony comes out with these days is hot. There's just no doubt about it. They put the amazing sensors in there. They've got great technology in their processors. They do everything right. They've got good lenses. The simple answer is it's going to sell. The more honest answer is who knows when we'll see them.
Yeah.
With shortages, and somebody mentioned, is it higher cost being charged down to sensor shortage? Nick Ken says there's so many reasons why costs are going up, from labor in warehouses not being able to work close enough, less people, different hours, things not being shipped properly. And there's so many reasons due to the COVID crisis that everything has gone up. Yeah. You can't pin it down to just this. Now, chips, we all know chips are, forget about it. Nobody has chips. Godox receivers, we can't even get. They're discontinued because they can't build them. They have no chips. It's just one example of another issue of not getting stock. And with Sony, lately we've been very lucky. We're getting stuff in, which is great to see. But when things are released new, we don't see them right away. Like, sure, they're announced. We can take down payments. We can get the orders in. But when they're actually out, who knows? And so we can get excited when they announce it. And if they give an actual embargo date, that's great. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be in people's hands right at that point everywhere, at least in Canada. Probably different in Japan and the States and stuff like that. But I don't work there, so I don't know.
No, I know. I think that, it's very likely they'll come out and do some sort of announcement in October, and I think it's very likely that they can still have them available for sale in November. But, is it going to be a box of 5 sent to a couple of stores throughout the country? We'll just have to wait and see. One of the things I like, Brian, about doing rumors is it's fun. It really is fun. And sometimes I get some viewers who'll say, because I got the DJI one wrong. It wasn't the Mavic Pro 3. It wound up being the Osmo 5, and all the rumors were pointing towards that. And rumors aren't always correct, but rumors to me are for dreamers, people who like to imagine what can be and what their next camera is going to be. But James, as a video person, what do you think if this camera does deliver 7K oversample 4K?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it QUHD? Because 33 megapixels is the minimum for that 16:9 8K, if I remember correctly.
Well, it does depend on the aspect ratio of the sensor, but most sensors follow that typical 35 millimeter aspect ratio. Very few provided, a film aspect ratio.
Yeah. No. So so it'll probably be 3.2. So it'll be slightly less than the QUHD. I think it's a solid. Camera. It's kind of what I thought when the A7S III was announced. I said, and actually, I wonder if Gaston is still in chat because me and him talk all the time, off screen, just everybody. And I wonder if he's keeping his eye out on this camera as well, because I know, he's into Sony. He's got a lot of Sony. He has the A7S III. He loves it. But I just go back to what I was thinking about when the A7S III was announced. I said, what happens when the A7 IV comes and it produces a more detailed, better video than the A7S III? I still think the A7S III was going to be a better low light, but the way filmmaking is moving now, a lot more people can lights and professional lighting is getting a lot more compact. It's getting a lot smaller, and it's getting a lot cheaper. This light over here, this is $100 that's sitting in this lamp. Those Aperture B7Cs, they're like $70 a piece, and they light well. The most expensive one, obviously the Aperture MCs, they're like I think they're like $80 a piece. Like, obviously something what's lighting me right now is a no. But the point I'm trying to make is that, as you know, if they come out and what they do, what they did for the A7 III, which is they give a lot of the features that was of the A7S II, but not as good of low light at a much cheaper rate. I think a lot of people are going to flock to this one, especially if you're a Sony shooter. I'm very curious to see. I'm really curious to see if they'll put 10-bit 422. They may just do 10-bit 420, kind of like the A1, just to sort of give something to the A7S III. Because if it's full 10-bit 422, they're going to do that multi-slot of SD cards and CF Express Type A.
Yeah,
they're going to do that with this camera as well. And if it comes anywhere between like $2,500, what's the argument for the A7S III? Still a great camera, but what would be the argument for that? But it's a solid camera. The A7 III the A7 line has always been a very popular with a lot of people, just because it's a very affordable camera that packs so much punch. So,
well, what you got to remember here, and I've been covering rumors for a couple of years now. When it comes to Sony rumors, and this has got nothing to do with the people that put together Sony rumors, Sony Alpha rumors, or the other sites out there, New Camera, Sony does a very, very good job of not leaking stuff. So whenever I see Sony rumors, I always take them with a grain of salt. One thing I know about Sony as a company, when they put their cameras out there, they're not the one to go ahead and put out video in a stills hybrid camera that is likely going to beat out the A7S III that much. But they are aware of the R5. They are aware of that price gap of $2,600 between the Alpha 1 and the R5. So if you take 7K over sample video and you put that in the A7 IV, that's going to get a lot of people thinking of the A7 IV over the A7S III. I mean, the A7S III does produce really good detailed video, but it would fracture the line a little bit. So I'm really curious to see what Sony's going to do and what the actual final specs are going to be. So a little bit of a grain of salt there. But John, again, you've been awfully quiet, because these two have got some really great stuff to say. What do you think about the A7 IV and some of these leaked specs?
Well, you're talking about comparing it to the R5. I'm thinking of it more of a direct competitor to the R6, especially given the price point, which is going to be virtually the same. And while I'm really mainly a photographer, the video thing I'm still basically a noob, certainly compared to the rest of this panel. But if they don't put in, 10-bit 422, which the R6 shoots, that would be a big mistake on their part. I think they need to have, certainly, that quality video compared to, what the other things that you were talking about this. So, well, I'm intrigued. I know the Sony shooters have been dying for this camera for like 2 years or whatever it is now, and it seems like this camera's been almost like a unicorn. It seems to be always just around the corner. It's just over the hills. Somebody saw a hoof print someplace, but there's a horn shedding on the lawn somewhere. But
I hate to say this, John, but right now UFO sightings are far more credible than A7 IV sightings.
The UFO sightings are certified now. You know,
Burn,
we
burn.
don't know what they are. There's something out there. We just don't know what it is.
That's
but there's
hot.
something out
I just got burned on that
No.
one.
So I mean, I'll be intrigued. I know the Sony users will definitely be very happy. Yeah, but we got to really see what the reality is once it comes out. Because, as you said before, Simon, Sony keeps this stuff really pretty close to the vest. So we'll see.
Yeah, and again, everyone, keep this in mind because all Sony, Canon, Nikon, they look at their customers and they look at who is this camera targeted for. And the A7 IV is a photography camera. It's aimed at photographers. It's aimed at people that want to produce really great stills images, and it covers a whole range of people. It can do fast action up to a certain degree. It does stills. It does fashion. It does wildlife. It does many different things. There's so many lenses that can hook up to the camera. But the video stuff, I'm a little hesitant to weigh in that they're going to give us 7K. 7K oversample 4K. I do think it's going to get enhancements to autofocus. I think it's going to get bird's eye autofocus and may even be able to shoot other animals very well with the autofocus system too. So I think it's definitely going to be a much more improved camera, but I don't think they're really going to push the video capability so much more that people are going to, because it's not just going to affect the Sony a7S III, but also the FX3, which is basically the same camera in a different shell. So $2,500 US, $4,500 Australian, and 2,400 pounds.
That's a good point. And just to piggyback real quick off of you, Simon, because I just thought about it, because it's like you also got to think about the price tag where it's at and who would be aiming to go to it at. It's not saying professionals wouldn't be looking at this camera. Obviously, some professionals are definitely going to look at it. But really, it's the people who want to get into the Sony ecosystem. And do you really want to drop 7K recording? Even if it's not 7K, if it's just oversampled 7K down to 4K. Do you really want to drop that much processing onto someone just coming into the Sony ecosystem?
If they're in marketing, I'm sure the answer is yes. But, the other parts of the organization.
I'm not sure this would really be an entry-level camera for people getting into the Sony system. I think it's for people who are already in the Sony system and looking for the next step up.
Yeah, I don't see it as entry either. But guys, there's more. We're not done with Sony. I want to extend that Sony conversation into some lenses. So
there's more.
Yeah, but wait, there's more. So along with the announcements.
Now how much would you pay?
Yeah, how much would you pay? Well, they're separately, unfortunately, but we're looking at a late October announcement, and that's when we're also supposed to be getting the FE 100mm f1.4 GM. And again, that's kind of Q4. It could even go into Q1 22 based on the different rumors that I've seen. But what I like about these is also you're going to be getting the Sony 28-75 f2.8, and that's going to compete against Tamron and Sigma. They're 28-75 and 28-70 FE. I did see some rumors also about a Sony 85mm coming in 2022, but I don't really like to go that far. That's more or less just wishing. So we've definitely got some new Sony lenses coming out in the next couple of months. So we're going to have an FE 100, and then we're going to have the 28-75. Brian, what do you think? Or let me just open this to everybody. Who wants to comment on these wonderful lenses that Sony's planning on bringing to market?
Well, let me just jump in. Now, let me just.
Go ahead, John. Go ahead, man.
I only know about Tamron. The Tamron lenses haven't gotten really good review. The 28-75 particularly. So I'd really be interested to see what the Sony version is going to cost. Compared to that, I mean, if that's a G Max, it's obviously going to be a lot more. And the question is it going to be enough better to justify whatever the additional cost is going to be? Because, like I said, the Tamron really gets rave reviews from pretty much everybody I've seen about it.
How's the sharpness towards the edges through the focal range, and in terms of chromatic aberration of the Tamron? How is it?
Well, again, not as a user, but I believe it shapes up really very well.
Because us consumers, we do funny things sometimes. I had a nice $2,000 EF 50mm f1.2 lens, and I upgraded and spent another $3,400 Canadian. for the RF version. And you know what? I would have been perfectly happy sticking with the older lens. And we as consumers sometimes, because there's a perceived extra sharpness, and there was, you could see it, it was measurable. If you go to Camera Labs, for example, Gordon Lang has looked at this and you can see there's a definite improvement. And I've noticed it too, but is it worth $3,400 Canadian or about $2,200 US? Well, that's really up to you, isn't it? And let me know in the comment section down below, what causes you to upgrade to a different lens? Is it the look? Is it the atmosphere? I've got some of these recently out of China. There's several companies now that are now producing affordable entry-level full-frame lenses. Liowa 35mm or 0.95 is being reviewed by a lot of people. I haven't had a chance to review it yet, but I look at this lens and yeah, you know, it's not as sharp. It falls off as you go through the focal range, and you know, chromatic aberration is there. But go back to the 70s and the 60s when, you know, lenses had more character, and you know, you could do everything right and still things weren't perfect. Technology today can produce things that are absolutely perfect, but there's also a sense of emotion and mood that you're trying to get. So let me know if you're looking at upgrading your lenses to something newer. Brian, do you have anything to say about these lenses?
Yeah, I love lenses. I absolutely love all kinds of lenses. I'm a believer of your camera is your tool, but your lens is your personality. So when it comes time to get into different lenses, I think that's where people should spend their money. All this talk about different camera bodies and new cameras coming out, honestly, in my opinion, that's only so that these manufacturers can keep on padding their pockets. They have to come out with something new when they need money. That's when they do it. They don't come out with new cameras every 6 months, every year. There's no specific time frame. Even Sony says this to me just the other day. They're not making cameras that don't make any margin anymore. They're not building product because it's not making them money. So what they're doing is they're coming out with the cameras that'll make them money, and that's why they bring them out. Then, of course, when they do that, they have to have new technology. They're always working on that tech, and it's always improving. So that's great. But the lens, Simon, you hit the nail on the head. There's lenses back in the 50s and 60s that are selling for 5 times more than they did a year ago today, because people are going back to film. People are going back to the feel and the look of an image. Yeah. And you don't need perfection. In fact, in my opinion, there's no such thing as perfect. You can spend all the money in the world and not have a clue how to use this stuff and make. Hey, I sell this stuff for a living, and I have a lot of customers that spend a lot of money, and I never see a single photo from them. I mean, that tells you a lot about the buyers, especially for the Sony line. There's people that'll just buy it because it's Sony. I have no problem with that. It's a cult of personality. They love it. They want to buy it. Please, thank you. I need to pay my mortgage. But that being said, there are so many amazing cameras out there that aren't being talked about, that if you used correctly can do amazing things. I mean, I've got a 1928 camera right here that if I went out and tried to make really good photos with it, it can make really good photos. And we're developing that film again. So, I mean, you and I have had the conversation about rumors, and I am honored to be here to talk with these things. And I love the conversation, and I really love your guests. I think these guys are awesome. But when we start talking about the latest and greatest, all I can think is cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And I don't know, man. I'm old school. I like to use things that work, not things that just cost money.
You know what, Brian? I want to back end that conversation because I agree. And you know, they shouldn't stay on the shelf. They should be on your lens. And I'll say this because I haven't made I don't have buyer's remorse. And yes, I spent a lot of money on this 50mm, but I'm running a channel, so it's expensed and it's taken care of that way. But one thing I always try to do, if you ever find yourself, you're like, I shouldn't have bought that, or you get buyer's remorse, I'm going to give you a tip that's going to really, really help you out. When you're looking at a new camera, don't look at the specs first. Ask yourself what capabilities, what outcomes, what results do you not like about your current gear that you want to see in future gear. So it's kind of, you're looking at the current state that you have, and you're looking at the future of what you want. And then you compare it to the cameras that are out there that are in your price bracket that you're looking at, and purchase based on capabilities, not specs. And you're going to find yourself a lot happier with your decisions. So while I spent $3,400 Canadian on the 50mm, when it came to the super telephoto, I spent around 900 US and I got the 800 millimeter because, while I could have justified it with a channel, dropping about $12,000 on a super telephoto lens that I'm going to use a couple of times a year, I just think if I do that, Brian, I expect you to hit me over the head with it. It's built tough. It can take it, and I need some sense knocked into me.
Well, here's another thing. Sorry, go ahead.
I was about to say, there's a saying, of course, that I'm sure you've all heard about. Date the body and marry the lens. I mean, that's the way. Yeah. That's the way I look at it too. And pretty much, since I'm not a professional, I'm basically I'm a hobbyist, and I've basically have upgraded my kit over the years with whatever extra money I've been able to put away and save or whatever. Or in one case, I guess I bought some stuff as a retirement present for myself after I left my job. So I had some fun set away as play money. That's what I bought some stuff with. But basically, every purchase that I've made has been based on what problem do I have photographically now that this new kit will solve, and if it doesn't solve that, then why am I buying it?
Exactly.
So that's pretty much the way and that way you avoid a lot of remorse. I mean, as some time goes by, and maybe. As you get used to a particular lens or a particular body, that you realize that you've, because of experience or new training or learning how to process things like that, you've been able to now realize images or realize the type of video, whatever that you can conceptualize, but you can't execute with what you have. And that's again when you start to look into something better. But I'm not gonna, buy just a shiny new toy just because it's a shiny new toy. Right. I can't afford that. So that's the way I look.
But there are a lot of people that can, and. That's
well. God bless them. I'm not one of them.
God bless them. Good for the economy. I do want to say though, the work-related comment. Nick Can says for him it's work-related. You buy it for what you need for work, and I know the native mount lenses are super important. For example, I'm obviously a Nikon shooter. I love the standard DSLR f mount, but the Z mount is huge. It's much bigger, and there's no vignetting. You get sharpness on even their kit lenses, edge to edge. You can shoot at any aperture. You don't need to shoot 2 stops over max to get that better sharpness like you would on the F mount and all that kind of stuff. So that whole concept of the new lens, the new bodies with the new mount, getting new lenses with that updated mount, in my opinion, is absolutely worth it. You're getting the native, you're getting faster focusing, you're getting better sharpness edge to edge. So that is where I would say spend the money. Right. If you do buy yourself a new body, get the native mount.
Yeah, okay. I agree.
Terrific. Well, let's move on to our next subject. OM Digital, Olympus, OM-D. I'm going to call them OM Digital. That's the name that's sticking with me. They've registered a new camera.
OMG.
And so those... OMG would definitely work too. Oh my God, Olympus, they've changed their name again.
Good to hear.
This is what it's supposed to be. It's it's not supposed to be. This is what we know so far. 2.4/5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, no Wi-Fi 6. It's got Bluetooth, and it's due out this year. And we're also going to be getting some lenses soon. But what I got to bring this up right now because I know what you're thinking. Is it the Wow camera? Yeah, I wonder the same thing too. Now, one thing we know about the Wow camera through various communications that OMD has made is surrounding their sensors. And this is not going to be full frame, but this is going to wow the market. And I really do hope it's one of those, because you see many people who will talk something up and they'll talk up this remote as though it's the next best thing that's going to change your life, when it's not. It's just a remote. And I'm really hoping when they say it's a Wow camera, we're going to look at this. I'm going to look at this. Brian's going to look at this. John, you, James are going to look at this and say, wow, that's pretty impressive. So let's open up to the panel, because one of the things I want to say first off is I'm really impressed with the communications that, I got to try to say the name properly here, OMD or Olympus have done. I really thought that once they spun this off, I thought this was a death spiral for them. I thought that whenever you do a spin-off, you're going to lose time. People are going to leave. And I just thought they're going to lose time that they don't have. And right away, this company got out there. Any chance they got out there, they started talking about stuff. They started producing stuff. They started communicating, and not in the way that you would expect from like Canon or Sony, where it was largely cryptic, and you really had to read between the lines. They were very sort of open book where they could be. And I got to tell you, I'm really pulling for OM Digital. I'm really excited. I love the look of their cameras, and I really do want to see them do well. So instead of opening it up to Brian and James this time, I want to go directly to John, who's been awfully quiet. And let's see, John, you've got the first word on this new camera.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to be the Wow camera, or do you think we're going to have to wait until Q1 2022?
You know, it's funny, you're going to me first. I really clearly I have no clue, to be honest with you. Uh, it's funny when Olympus basically sold the camera division. I just thought that the DG was it DG get the name of the GIP. I thought they were just going to basically just sell that division for parts, and it seems like they've actually taken a really serious look at really building this brand up. So I'm intrigued to see what they do. I really have no idea what it's going to be.
Yeah, no, you're right. They really have. They very quickly let the market know, because a lot of people think the same thing. Oh, we got a live caller coming in.
That's
oh, that's never mind. John's just playing around. So let me see. Can I mute John?
I knew I needed to put this phone on silent.
Don't make me mute you, John. Don't make me do it. My buttons.
It's done.
Okay, there we go.
It's picked up.
I don't think it's going to be the Wow camera, but that's, and remember, now this is coming from Nakashita, so we know we're going to see something within, what is it? Is it 2 weeks to 6 weeks from when your camera's registered? I think that's usually the time frame it takes before we see it. It can go as long as 3 months. But look, we're in September now. School's over, Labor Day's over. So we're getting very, very serious about announcements. We're going to see a lot of them. We're going to see at least 2 next week. And between now and I would say the end of October, we're going to see a bulk of stuff announced. OM Digital did say we were going to get the Wow camera this calendar year. But they said that in January, right when a lot of the market thought we would start to improve into this year. And actually things have got worse this year. So I'm not sure. But Brian, what are the camera gods saying to you?
Well, we haven't had Olympus in our store in a long time.
So not much.
No. So I think it's fantastic that OM Digital is a thing, because people really are passionate for their Olympus cameras.
Yeah.
Because the 4/3 sensor means your lenses are smaller and people want to get them for travel, and that's great. But 4/3 sensors have other big negative things. In my opinion, anything that's a 4/3 sensor is a non-issue, is something to walk away from, unless you're doing video. And even in my experience, colleagues I work with that shoot video have seen, have changed from their 4/3 sensor cameras to Sony, let's just say. So the size of the sensor has a real impact on the ISO noise. It makes it look like brush strokes, like watercolor, when you shoot at higher ISOs. For photography in my world, every single time I've used one, it has really disappointed me. The colors are fantastic. In great light, they pop. The colors are great. Those Zuiko lenses are sharp as a tack. There's no issue there. The issue is the size of the sensor. So until Olympus or OM Digital, whatever you want to call them, come out with an APS-C or a full frame, I don't really give them a lot of thought. And until we start seeing stock, and that's a whole other issue, right? Because I mean, it's all great when companies can bring out products, but unless they're in stores to sell, it doesn't do people much good.
I hear you, but I also got to bring up some more positive news on OM Digital. Guys, we've got more good news here. We've got some more lenses coming out. And as you can see from this roadmap here, we've got updated. We've got the ED 20mm f1.4 Pro, as well as the ED 40 to 150mm f4 Pro as well. But that's not all. And as one of my guests said earlier, but wait, there's more. They have identified another macro as well as 2 telephotos, somewhere between, again, that 40mm and about 150mm, but they haven't put any specs there. So I'm really excited to see what OM Digital is doing here. These guys have really, they've got my heart. I feel for them, kind of like Pentax, although Pentax is not communicating as much, and it's that communication that OM Digital is doing that is really kind of got me in their corner, pulling for them. So I really do hope they can pull this one. I hope they can pull the plane up and land safely at an airport. James, what do you think of OM Digital, the new lenses? Your thoughts?
I'll be brief. Not that much to say. I think Brian and John hit the nail on the head. It's cool that the things are going on. For me, I don't know what to make of Micro Four Thirds at this moment, and that's the whole situation. I mean, me and you and Simon have talked about this for a while now. I don't know what the Micro Four Thirds system seems to not have its place. I mean, there's going to be people that are just they love Micro Four Thirds, they love Micro Four Third lenses, they love the size, the small. They're very, they don't bring a lot of baggage with them in terms of weight. But when you're getting all the capabilities for not that much higher price in APS-C, like Fuji cameras, or even full frame cameras like Canons and Sonys, where does Micro Four Thirds? Because I just think every time I think about like either the potential Wow camera or the lenses, I just think back to the GH5 II. It was announced and the potential GH6, and everybody was like, okay, cool, because it's like because at the end of the day, everybody's thinking, where's this all going? Because if people weren't like very little excitement for something like the GH5 II, and there's somewhat excitement for a GH6, but then everybody goes, there's the S1H that's full frame. That's better, much better in low light. That has much better dynamic range. That has much better capabilities, both stills and video. So that's essentially my thoughts and all this. It's sort of like where I don't want to be. I'm with everybody. I hope things go through, but I really think OMD needs to make some sort of pivot because and go to something like medium formats. But
yes,
because I'm
wow.
Micro Four Thirds is a slowly dying market. It's a market that's like slowly dying.
I gotta interject here because one thing I've looked at some of the stuff that what Panasonic can do, and from what I've seen in a lot of comparisons, the difference in low light performance and other capabilities when you compare Micro Four Thirds to full frame, yeah, it's huge. But when you compare it to APS-C, like the GH5, I would have bought one of those if it wasn't for the autofocus system, because like Jordan Drake uses the Panasonics all the time because he's constantly out with a crew of at least two. So it's easy for him to have Chris stand there and then he can pull the focus and do all that, lock it manual. But with a lot of stuff that I'm doing, I just can't afford to pull the focus, so I didn't go with it. But I was very, very impressed with the GH5. I think the S1 is terrific. The only thing that held me back was the autofocus system. But I want to take us to another news story here, and this kind of is...
Sorry.
Yes?
Am I able to just kind of make one more point?
You may.
Sorry. As far as the Micro Four Thirds sensor goes, I have seen them used really, really effectively in macro photography. A colleague, Don Komarechka, uses the Panasonic formats to do probably the most incredible macro work you've ever seen. So there's no doubt about it that the capabilities are there. The issue I have is specifically with the Olympus lineup. They are made to be small. They're made for the consumer who's going to be doing traveling, and yet their menus are probably the hardest to use on the market.
Yeah.
So they're marketing themselves to retirees who are traveling a lot. That's who I've seen in store who get the most out of them.
Yeah.
Right. The people who've retired and they've traded in all their Canon and all their Nikon. They're going small. They're traveling the world. But then they can't use them. They have trouble with their menus and they have to come back in to get help with all that. So there's this weird dynamic going on. Panasonic, on the other hand, their menus are spectacular.
Yeah.
So if you are going for a 4/3 sensor, you're still getting an easy to use camera with the smaller size, but they make the medium format. They've thought ahead. They're not going to be just disappearing like a lot of the other stuff is. So I'm sorry that I went a couple extra seconds there on it, but I thought that was important.
That's all right. This is not Congress where we time you and give you 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever it is.
My time
is up.
Get the hook.
I am facilitating because I do want to try to keep this to never go over 2 hours. But you know, if we have a lot to talk about, something like we did with the Canon R3 and the Sony A7 IV and the lenses, then I'll more than open that up. But now it's time to move on to our next subject. Now, this subject is kind of revealing because it's telling us something we're kind of already aware of, but it's showing it to us in drastic numbers. And when we think of companies such as Pentax, and I love Pentax, I think it's a terrific company. You know, they were the first to come out with an SLR. They were the first to come out with autofocus, and you know, they didn't sell really well right away because sometimes when you're first to market, you're too early and the technology hasn't been baked out. But what we're seeing here now is a marketplace that has been in decline since 2011. 2011 was the best year. Now, we're looking at a projected 7.1 million units worldwide shipped, not sold, shipped. These are shipped numbers. Last year, look at that, 5.3 million. Now, to put this in stark contrast, remember Pentax I was telling you about? I can't remember if it was 1972, 1970, it was around then. But in their best year, they had 1 million units sold. Now, here we are, 5.3 last year. Yes, there were a lot of issues, but we're still trending downwards. Even with a projected 7.1 million units shipped in 2021, that's lower than 2019, pre-semiconductor shortage, pre-COVID, which is lower than 2018-17, all the way back to 2011. But there are some messages here, and I'm going to show you a few more slides here. So if we take a look at this image here, this shows us total digital sales cameras. Digital, what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm tongue-tied. I want to say...
Interchangeable lens?
No, digital still camera. It just took me a while to get the word out. So this is everything. So this is showing you 2019, 2020, and 2021. And you can see that while they're projecting 2021 to be better by about 1 million or so, when you look at this chart here, it doesn't look as rosy as they make it out to be. So what really helped save 2020 was the final quarter. We see September, October, November do very, very well, but the rest of the year are not so good. And if we look at how this year started, it started worse than last year. And in the last month, it's about the same. So, you know, 20 or 7.1 million might be a little bit rosy. And if we look at the next couple of slides here, they just break it down. So this is for interchangeable lens, digital stills cameras, and this is just those cameras that the lens is built in and you can't change it. So I think this is a real big scare for a lot of these companies, such as OM Digital, that's trying to rethink, as Brian, you had said about what Sony thinks. If they can't make money, they're not doing it. And I think Japanese Industrial Partners, aka OM Digital, aka Olympus, guys, you've really got a branding problem here. I shouldn't have to go through 3 different names to figure out who you are. That's the only criticism I have. But this is a big problem with about, and Canon predicted that at 5 million units worldwide, where they could see the market stabilizing. Imagine that, 5 million units worldwide. And when we say digital stills cameras, we're talking about stills hybrids. So the R5s, the A7S3s, cameras that are primarily engineered for stills, but also produce video. So now you've got Sony and Canon with about 70% of the market share. At least 30% for Nikon, Pentax, Olympus, Panasonic, and others. This makes it really, really tough. And that's why this is a story I feel a little sad to recover. And that's why I like to show you these images here, because, you know, we hear, 5.3 last year, but 7.11 projected this year. Yeah, but the charts don't show such a rosy picture. It really depends on what they can get out the door and ship. And of course, what new cameras are going to be announced. Who would like to first chime in on the panel to discuss this sad, sad situation of the marketplace? Well,
I'll chime in just to start. I mean, there's a lot of things to unwrap with those numbers. I mean, obviously the pandemic is a problem, but of course then you also have the processor, shortages is a real huge problem that's affecting multiple industries. I mean, Cameras, they can't, you can't ship what you can't make. You can't stock what you can't ship. You know, so that's a big problem. And of course, you have obviously the smartphones are increasingly taking over the market. And in terms of the interchangeable lens market, is pretty much coming down to Sony and Canon and everybody else. And everybody else is getting a smaller and smaller piece of the pie all the time. If I'm a stockholder of Nikon or whatever, I'm very worried right now. So there's a lot of things going on with that. If all things were equal and you had no pandemic and you had no chip factory burned down to the ground, then things might be a little bit different. But then the question is, how much different?
Yeah, see, that's a good point, John, because when we look at a declining market like this, and all these camera companies, they know it's happening. And you know what's really sad too? I'm going to go off in the weeds a little bit. Pentax. Ricoh bought Pentax not too long ago. And then a few years after that, they changed their name to Ricoh Imaging. Pentax wasn't even in the name anymore. And now if you look at the financials, digital cameras is way, way down on the list. And all these companies, even Canon, they're starting to look to other areas of imaging to make more money because they realize this market's declining. So they're looking at medical equipment. They're looking at copiers and other things that have traditionally done very well for them. What's really tough when you see this is, all these companies that are under strain, and Nikon's been doing a great job of trying to change the ship, and they've made some big decisions, so it looks like they bought themselves some time. But they must be thinking this is the last thing they wanted, was a global chip shortage that is going to be, by many, many predictions, not going to start getting better till about 2023. Oh, yeah, and by the way, we have a global pandemic, too, that is disrupting everything. So it's really tough. Brian, what do you think about these numbers here? How does this make you feel? I mean, you've been in the market for a long time and see things change.
Yeah, I think the most popular camera right now is a disposable film camera.
Really?
Absolutely.
I thought it was
Guaranteed.
the iPhone 12.
Nope. I don't know, maybe. And I'm not speaking from numbers that I've seen. I'm speaking from what we actually have leave our store. So
yes, got it.
We can't keep disposable film cameras in our stores. We can't go. We go through more film developing than we have the past 15 years I've worked at Henry's combined.
Wow.
And I'm talking about just since COVID. So film is where these guys should start to think. Nikon, Canon, Sony, Pentax, come out with film cameras. Come out with a whole series with autofocus lenses that are still current. That's where the money will be, in my opinion. That being said, Pentax, what happened to Pentax? They were bought by Ricoh. They made all these promises that they're going to come back with this new lineup. Yeah. I love Pentax. If I wasn't a Nikon shooter and Pentax was still a thing, I would seriously consider the Pentax.
They're still a thing. They're still a thing.
They are, but they're not. They're not
holding
in stores.
On.
They're virtually impossible to find in a store. That's the kind of thing you have to do your research and source out these days. So it makes it difficult for a consumer to stick with a brand, even though they might want to stick with it. So as much as I love the brand, I don't think that they're going to do well. And I think you're definitely finding the Sony, Canon, and Nikon are the players right now. And then for the real big end, you're finding Red, and you're finding some of these other high end camera companies doing very well because they're building for their demand, and they make stellar product. But Canon, Nikon, Sony, I think that they're going to keep on doing what they do.
No, I think you're right. It's just I was watching not too long ago an old video that Tony Northrup put out where he looked at Pentax, and when I said the first SLR and the first with autofocus, they were also very early on with medium format too. God love them. Pentax really pushed things. They really tried. These guys loved cameras, like the Fuji people. They really loved what they did. And it's just so sad to see them fizzling out. But I agree. I think, if you own Sony or Canon and gear, I don't think you have to worry about being supported for many years. If you don't, even the others, even if any of these companies do go under, you're still going to be able to source bodies and lenses for a long time to go. Because a lot of people, once a company goes under, they jump ship and they start selling gear, and that's an opportunity to keep going. Look how many people are using lenses that are from the 50s and 60s. You
But
still got
is
that option.
photography dying? No, photography is not dying.
No, it's
People
just
are still going
changing.
to buy cameras. It's changing.
Yeah.
People, they want to go back to that esoteric feel of film. And like I even ask people, why do you want to go back to a disposable camera? Well, because the cell phones, this is an answer I actually got
Yeah.
from a customer the other day. Cell phones are too confusing and too distracting. The minute you open up your cell phone to take a picture, you get a pop-up of something, you start doing this, you start doing that, you forget taking pictures. So I was shocked, and I loved that answer. I've always asked people, why are you going to film? I hate film. Why do you go to film? Because it's simplifying their world. And that's when you can strip away the distractions and just shoot with a camera without all these extra toys. It makes you enjoy photography more, at least for a lot of
Brian,
people. And
let me ask a question about that, Brian. I mean, do you have an idea in terms of demographic of people who are favoring
younger people, yeah.
throwaways, I suppose? I'm sorry?
A lot of younger people. The younger
Really?
generation is all going to the film, yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy. It blows my mind, and it's been going on literally since we've opened up after we had the lockdown the first time last March. Since we reopened last June, not this past, but the year before, film has been going nuts. We can't keep it in the store. It's either stuff for streaming, working from home, or film. And of course, I mean, the Sonys, Canons, and Nikons, they're all going to sell well. You got a user that needs that stuff. But the younger generation and a lot of the older people cleaned out their crawl spaces, found a lot of film. Next thing you know, they're like, hey, I should try this again. And film is getting huge.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear it's younger people rather than older people, because you said in terms of people, finding his cache of film and wanting to use it and get back into that I can actually almost like kind of identify. In terms of younger people, I'm wondering if it's a little bit of a nostalgia for that which they don't even remember. So how long would that
absolutely
last?
Absolutely, that's what it is. I agree. And it's funny because I don't know if this is going to focus, but the expiry date on this film is from before 90% of the people buying film today.
Hold that up again. I'm going to make you go solo so people can see that.
I don't know if it's even upside down or what.
No, it's 0467, or is it, or 87?
87.
87.
Yeah,
wow.
So this film expired before 90% of the film users today were even born. And that blows my mind.
Wow. Before we go on to the next topic, I got to tell you, I completely lost my thought on where I'm going to go with it, so I'm not going to go there. Oh no! Yes, I remember now. You were talking about how Canon and others should think of going back to digital. Brian, we just finally got Canon to go into mirrorless, so I don't know.
Well, Nikon still makes a film camera. They still make a brand new film camera. It sells for about $4,000.
Wow.
It's a pro film camera. They're the only company I know of that still makes a film camera. And please, whoever's watching, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm more than happy being wrong about stuff.
Yeah, we're live on the internet, so we do expect the internet to spank us if we get something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that like an F something?
Yeah, I think it's an F5.
Oh, scratchy eye. Sorry about that, guys. And no, I didn't give you the finger while I adjusted my glasses. I try very much. Normally, I don't wear glasses, but with such a small screen here, I need to. And now, for our next topic, I promise you talk on lots of lenses. Well, no, I didn't press the button here. Let's try that again. I promise you talk on lots of lenses. Is that better the second time around? We've got news I'm pressing the wrong mouse button. See, okay, let you know my setup here. So I've got my main computer right here. And then over here, I have another computer with the PowerPoint slides and my speaker notes so I can remember things better. And it's right under the lens, so if I'm looking at that, you really can't tell I'm not looking at you. And so the trackpad controls that. So I got to move that over the way and use this other trackpad. So now, here we go.
Never mind.
Yeah. Let me try this a third time. This is live, man. I'm just.
Can I just talk about the last topic before you?
Sure.
before we move on, I think what's interesting is just that, and I love the observation, especially from you, Brian, seeing it from a retail perspective. But I look at it as like this was sort of a trajectory. If you looked at how camera manufacturers going, this was sort of how everything was going in terms of just cameras were not selling as much as before. And I think the pandemic, and now because of the pandemic, the chip shortage, it just sped everything up. Like a lot of things that were not doing well around the world. It I think it's just what it's very interesting that you said that, Brian, about the younger people coming to film, and I find that very curious. But I also think it kind of makes sense, because especially being a year with just sort of a lot of people being locked, being on lockdown, being in one place, for like, since the development of smartphones, we've sort of experienced the world through this little thing so far. But now it's like seeing that we've sort of been being through isolation. I guess my I could be totally wrong. I think a lot of people are sort of now looking like, man, I've there was a year of experiences that has been gone. Let me actually start now enjoying these experiences again, instead of just looking everything through, this piece of technology.
Yeah.
And to me, that's kind of a beautiful thing that through all of this has come about, is that we're sort of now not just living through our phones anymore. We're now also living to just experience life again, just wanting to be able to just capture those moments, not just on the photo so we can just put it on the gram so we can flex about how great our life is, even though we all know it's BS because you've just been in lockdown for 12 months. So in a weird way, it's kind of a wonderful thing that we're now seeing people wanting to just go out and live again.
Nicely said. Well said. Now I'm going to try this for the third time. Next, I want to get into talking some more lenses that are coming out, and these lenses are supposed to be announced next week. Let me show you a slide here. The first one I want to talk to you about is the Canon RF 16mm f2.8, and we know it's an STM. How do we know? Well, this is a leaked image we got, and I was able to read yes, I could actually read that. I zoomed in, and it is an STM. Now, this is going to be announced next week. I don't know if it's going to be announced on the 14th or not, but how do we know? Well, it was leaked from Amazon. Somebody was able to snap some photos, which I will show you later, that actually showed this lens where you were able to pre-order it, and it showed the price. So it's going to have about the same proportions of the Canon RF 50mm, but it's not going to have image stabilization. But wait, there's more. We also have another affordable lens coming from Canon, same time that we're going to get announcement of the 16mm, and that's going to be this guy here, the Canon 100-400 f5.6-8 image stabilized USM. Again, this was leaked through Amazon, and it's going to have a maximum focus distance of 88 centimeters at 200 millimeters and a maximum magnification of 0.41 times at 400 millimeters. Now, if you're going to pair it with the R5 and the R6, you will get 6 stops of stabilization, but if you've got an EOS R or RP, it's going to drop down a little bit to 5.5 stops. And the good news for those of us that actually do have the extenders, and I've got one right over there, the 2x extender, it will work with this lens, so that's really, really good news. But now you're probably wondering what the price is. I know I would be. And so here we are. The 16mm is going to be $299.99 US dollars, a little higher than I thought it would be. I was hoping it'd be down around $199 to $250, but still, as far as RF glass goes, that's quite affordable. And the Canon RF 100-400mm f5.6-8 is $649. Now, while I've got this slide up here, Brian, I'm going to pick on you because you're in retail. You probably know the prices better. And Brian's going to give me Canadian prices, but I believe the 800mm is around $899 US, which is what, about $1150 Canadian or $1,200 Canadian?
The 800mm, you're saying?
Yes. And I'm wondering about the 600mm too.
Yeah, the 800 is $1150. And the 600 is $880.
I think my chair's falling down. Let me just, sorry, I'm not slouching. I think, there we go, that's better. Sorry, so how much is the 600mm?
$880.
So probably around $600 US. So let's look at this here. Now the 600mm is f11. Here, you're not going as far as 600. You're paying a little bit more, but you're getting 100 to 400 millimeters, and you're getting it at a 5.68. Now, a lot of things can go into play here. I love this thing. I've done videos about this thing, and I'm going to have a link in the description down below with this one here, I was just out last night, I shot Jupiter. And I've shot Jupiter many times, but you see, the footage I have, I know I can push it, and I want to push it better and better. So one day I can show you guys the video, and I can show you how well I shot Jupiter. This time around, you can see all the different bandings on Jupiter. Really, really great. I can't quite pull the red spot yet. But also, I was shooting last night at around 8 o'clock to 8:30. Thank you so much for my tea. And it had gotten dark at around, I think it was 7:40. So it hadn't been dark very long. And Jupiter was only sitting just a little bit above the horizon. So you're still getting a lot of that heat rising up. And it was some of the best images I had yet. So hopefully it's going to get colder soon. I'm going to try get Jupiter a little bit higher up, and I'm going to shoot with this thing, and I'm going to love it. But I'm shooting at f/22. And with that, you are going to get chromatic aberration. Now, the nice thing about Jupiter, because at the top at the pole, it has a bit sort of blue area where it's got that octagonal cloud formation. So if somebody says, hey, did you pick up on that? I'll just go, yes, when really it's chromatic aberration. Without the 2x extender, I don't get that with this. And that's the thing, that's what I'm waiting to see with the 100 to 400. I mean, at $650, am I going to get it? The real questions to ask is, Simon, are you going to get the 16 millimeter and the 100 to 400? Oh, I want to. I really do.
Lenses I said it earlier, how important I think. Honestly, the 14 millimeter 1.8 Sony lens is making me want to switch to Sony. That lens alone would actually sway me to change brands, because it is so nice and sharp on edges. So when you get these new lenses and they're doing great things, and you can get one that's more reasonably priced, that's why these are f11 lenses, because they don't want to be a $25,000 lens that's an f4 or something, right? So to keep the cost down and come out with these new lenses that are lightweight, primes, small apertures, I love the idea. I think it's great.
Yeah, no, I got to, look, if you've been subscribed and you watch all my videos, you know this about me. It's how the lenses make me feel. And, you know, this guy here, he may be the biggest lens in my lineup, but it's the one that makes me most feel like a kid. The things that I've been able to capture with it. Brian, you know, I always talk at the beginning of my videos saying, you know, shooting live in northern Canada in the remote hinterland. And it certainly looks like that with the footage, but, you know, I frame the camera so you don't pick up the houses around. And really, look, just a secret between me and you guys. I live in the GTA, which is the Greater Toronto Area. It's a city of 5.5 million people. But don't tell everybody that. And I tell you, Brian, I went out there around December last year. You're not going to believe what I saw. I saw beavers. Mm-hmm. 2 of them building a dam. So I rushed home. I got my tripod. I got the R5. I put this up on there, and I shot it. I went home, and I'm going like, oh, what a letdown this is. These aren't beavers. They're imposters. They're muskrats.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. And the thing is even with the LCD, I could not see detailed enough, and I didn't have my glasses. I couldn't make out. Although I kind of sensed the tail, I'm thinking like, okay, something is weird about that tail. And it wasn't until I put it in my editing computer I realized these aren't beavers at all, but they look so similar. And I know they're not related. Well, they're related in that they're both rodents. But I've kind of rambled on here a little bit talking about the importance of lenses. And you know what? You don't have to spend $3,500 or $10,000 on a really good lens to really fall in love with this stuff. It's about capturing what matters to you. And for me, it's the world outside. You see now that I've abandoned the studio and I start shooting outside in these different locations because I love it. I love the forest. I love seeing different animals. And I love capturing my son as he grows up in those videos as well. So it's lenses like the 800 millimeter I love, the 100 millimeter f2.8 I love too, but it's my photo. I turn into a photographer with that one. The 24 to 105 f4.
That sounds like a bad thing.
No, not at all. But you see what these lenses do to me, and you can tell it does the same to Brian too. And you know what? I would like to take this opportunity to give you guys a chance to tell us some stories about a lens you had or have, and how it made you feel. And Brian, I'd like you to run with it first because you started me on this path.
Oh, that's awesome. A lens that I have
Or had.
Okay. Well, my favorite lens of all time is this old school 2485D Nikon lens. I love this thing. It's got macro, so I can zoom into 85 mil and literally be like an inch away from something. One of the things that I get very frustrated with is when people don't understand what lenses actually do. Compression, stretching, foreshortening, getting shallower depth of field by zooming in, moving in close, opening the aperture, not just aperture, right? Being able to control your visual by using your lens correctly. So this 2485, I use this for all my light painting. I use it for so many different things. But the fact that I can zoom into 85, get in close, and still shoot at f4 gives me the ability to, within a very small range when I'm doing light painting, control depth of field ridiculously well. So I can set up a scene where there's a moon, a picture of a moon like here, and there's a little wolf right here. There's a moon. Where am I here? This way. Moon, wolf. And they could be literally this far apart from each other, but the moon could be completely out of focus and blurry because I'm able to get focus here and blur here, being able to zoom in and do all these different things. So a lens like this 2485D, you can buy one for $200-300, and it's sharp as a tack. It focuses quickly, but this one's special. This one actually has a little chip in the glass, and I love that. I know it sounds really weird. I named my gear. So camera is the Schwartz, my D7100. My infrared camera is named Herschel because Sir William Herschel discovered infrared light. My Sony Alpha is named Matilda because it's an Ansel Adams story. Anyway, long story short, this one here is named Chip. So I get to use Chip all the time. And if I get him aimed just right, I can get that sun hitting that chip and creating a really cool lens flare. And I've become purposeful with that in my images. So when you learn your lenses and you understand the difference, for example, a 14 mil Nikon fisheye compared to the 16 mil fisheye, this is rectilinear corrected. It's going to be straight edges. It's going to be nice and sharp. You can take a picture of architecture without the bowing curve, where the other one is smaller, lighter, and cheaper, but you get this completely bowed image. So understanding the difference can make is the difference between an artist and somebody who just likes buying gear.
Yeah, and you don't have to be, a professional artist. I named my channel very specifically. I really like the Everyday Dad, and I thought that's cool because, no matter what he does, he's dad, and he's an everyday dad. He's just a regular guy. Although with this channel growing so much, he's becoming a little bit more than just the everyday dad. And I didn't want to copy him, but when I thought about what I did is, I make videos, and, we used to call them films, but now we call them movies or videos. And I thought, ordinary filmmaker, I really like that. Now, some people said to me, you don't want to be that ordinary. He's not that great. And I said, that's the whole point. I'm setting this up as that I'm like you. I'm not this great Spielberg or George Lucas and how he started. I mean, George Lucas, you go watch his first movie, American Graffiti, and just incredible the talent that man had. Everyone thinks Star Wars, but go back and watch American Graffiti. After this, watch it. Trust me, you're going to enjoy it. It's a great movie, film. See? Interchangeable. And, it's... I'm almost getting too emotional here, but it's these lenses really do change how we go about things. And yes, I'm ordinary. Now, I have gotten better. And yes, I have the R5. Not everybody can afford that. But this is where when you give me super chats or when you watch or if you buy a hat, ordinaryfilmmaker.com/merch hat, or I get reviews for stuff, this helps me put money back into the channel so I can buy this stuff and I can show you what I as an ordinary person can do and deliver. And, it's acting like that 11-year-old. Remember when you were 11 or 9 and you were just amazed by everything you came across, but you had grown enough that you started to comprehend how amazing everything was. Now with that, speech is definitely not the right word. I should use some of my British mannerisms and just say diatribe. But let's go on to James. And James, if you can tell us a story about how a lens or an experience with a lens, current or past, or future, if you're clairvoyant enough.
Yeah, no problem. I'm not clairvoyant. That's definitely for sure. So you'll lose a lot of money if you try to take how I'm going to predict the future. I'm going to talk about this lens right here. This is the Helios 44-4M. This is one of these old Russian lenses that I've got a little adapter to about to Canon EF glass. I bought this after after watching one of Armando's videos, but I just remember one time I was listening to another YouTuber, and he was doing this challenge, and he basically was challenging himself to basically shoot something but use a very certain limitation, and it could be any limitation. This time, and I did his challenge as well, and basically I shot on my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera using only this lens, and I got a friend. We went out around downtown Philadelphia and just started shooting with it. And this was like, and there was a couple things like it was just one battery, just this one lens. So I had to shoot what I can because for those of you that are not familiar with the Blackmagic Pocket cameras, they drain quickly, but the image, as old and vintage as you could get one of these for like $55 US. There's there is a lot of flaws, but that's what makes this thing so unique and so beautiful, because the bokeh are very distorted, but it's such a beautiful distortion. There's a beautiful swirl with this lens, and it gives such a dream-like essence. Like if you get a chance to be around a bunch of lights where you can just create a devil and get the bokeh, it's some of the most beautiful images you can get out of this lens. Now you got to be very, very careful in terms of lens flare, because does this thing flare up harder than some. Well, no, this is family friendly channel. Let me stop. Anyways,
or as Bob Ross would say, these are accidental opportunities. Everybody remember Bob Ross, the painter?
Oh yes.
But
happy accidents.
Happy accidents.
Yeah,
yes.
happy accidents. But yeah, anytime I want a chance to just go out and just create a dream essence and want to just something that I was like, oh, this would be nice to remember, I bring this lens because it's just something that I can toss. It's easy to go with, and this has probably been some of the images that I've got off this lens that have not only just I've fallen in love with, but inspired me, and I love that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, I'm feeling it too. John, it's all yours.
Yeah,
you have the floor.
Let me just make sure I'm not muted, because I had some background noise and I muted myself.
Sorry,
for a minute.
What, John? I can't hear you.
Very funny. No, I mean, as one who is like migrating from the EF to the RF, I'm discovering like new lenses in the new architecture. You know, in fact, I just bought the 100-8 and the 100-500. You know, and I love both of them. I haven't shot either one a lot, but my last video, I touched on my experiences with those, and I really captured some images and video, for that matter, that I would not have been able to get with anything else that I had up to that point. So I'm really very much leaping into and embracing like the new lenses and such. Although with my relatively limited funds, unless I get a million subs out of nowhere, I'm not going to be buying anything more anytime real soon. I'm looking. I got a photograph that's on my wall as I'm looking across from me, and I really like everything about it. This is one that I shot with a 60D and what the heck was it? 18-135 kit lens, and I like everything about that image except the chromatic aberration, which is horrible. And I wish I could go back in time and take it over again. I guess I could go back to the location and take it over again, but it wouldn't be
Wouldn't be the same.
quite the same. So,
Yeah.
so I as I've gotten along, I mean, I understand like a lot of the nostalgia about old lenses. I've got a camera that that I got from my dad that's like 60 years old. I haven't shot it in about 30 years, but I have it just to have it. It's an old Kodak. I forget what the model of it is. And it's a wonderful looking piece of machinery, but and even as a film camera, it wouldn't take images anything that I would really put up or even print anything bigger than 4x6, frankly. So I mean, I really am kind of really getting into the new stuff, and I am gradually starting to look at some of my older EF lenses as I get into the RF stuff. But my funds are not unlimited, so I have to be careful about what I get and why I get it.
No,
But the 102.8 is like amazing in terms of 1.4x magnification. I mean, I'm pretty much like I shot some B's or whatever, like maybe about an inch or so away from the front element. It's I'd never been able to get that close with anything before. So there's things I'm really looking forward to be able to do with the 35. I have the 35 1.8, which is a really good all around lens. It's my main video lens now. And it's probably the only prime lens I'm using regularly, though. I'm looking at that 16-2.8. It looks intriguing, especially for low light photography. I don't do much night photography, but but night or blue hour shots could be pretty good with that lens. I know you and I had chatted about that offline in terms of whether it would meet your needs, because you were looking for like a 16-1.8, and there's not anything like that in Canon's architecture, even in the EF mount. So we have to see what we can get.
No, I hear you. But this brings us to the final segment of the show, where I'm just going to talk about a few items, but this is where I want to open you up. We've only got about 16 minutes left. If you've got any questions for me or the panel, go ahead and post them in the comments, and I'll do my best to get to as many of them as we can. But in the final news piece here, I want to talk to you about a couple of things. And the first is the Canon EOS RA has stopped production, and the rumor is, according to Canon rumors, that's it. It's done. Don't worry if you're into astrophotography and want a specialized sensor. Well, Canon is rumored to be coming out with an R5 astrophotography camera. So we have to look for a potential EOS R5 based astrophotography camera. Also, Nikon is going to be introducing a Z-mount 40mm f2. That's coming soon. And we're getting two L-mount Alliance lenses. We're getting the Sigma 90mm, the 24mm. The 90 is an f2.8, the 24 is an f2, and they're both priced at $640. And we have an Apple event coming Tuesday. I'll talk about that just briefly. But just again to remind you that I did make a mistake. I reported that we're getting the DJI Mavic Pro 3 on an announcement. That didn't happen. The rumors were indicating that we're getting one, so I would expect that maybe it's going to be sometime in the future. But it's definitely not happening. We got the Osmo 5. Sometimes it happens when you cover stories. So I want to talk a little bit about the Apple event. And the one thing you might be watching, of course, Richie does a great job of covering this. Is this an event where we're going to see some more hardware for those of us waiting for something a little bit more powerful than any of the M1 Mac Minis, MacBook Air, or MacBook Pros? And no, it doesn't look like that. I mean, Apple could do it, but this is most likely it's going to be the iPhone 13. It's going to be maybe an iPad, a watch. That's probably what we're going to see. Now, Apple could choose to do an announcement of something wonderful like they've done in days past, where they talked about the iMac Pro and they said it would come out in November. So they have done that. But rumor is we're supposed to get some sort of other announcement later in the fall where we're going to get some more heavy-duty hardware, such as the MacBook Pro 16 with an M1 architecture. And I think that's really going to be the big thing. If you're looking at doing video editing, I love this MacBook Air, the fact that it can do everything, that it's more than capable of live streaming in 4K with 3 guests while simultaneously recording that 4K feed to my hard drive while I'm doing other stuff. There's no fans. It is hot to the touch. And it's just absolutely doing wonderful. But I want a bigger screen. I do need more memory. Apple's showing me that with just 8 gigabytes of RAM, I can do all this. If you can get 8 gigabytes of RAM. I was of the belief that you needed 32 gigs, and that used to be based on Intel processors in the old architecture. And I really don't know what to recommend. I think that if you can afford 32 gigs, consider it. But with this new architecture, you might be able to get by at 16 gigs. I'm really stunned that with 8 gigs and a 7-core GPU, part of Apple's architecture, that I'm able to do this editing on a machine this small. So we'll just have to wait and see. I don't see any new comments coming in. I know you guys are probably falling asleep. 57 people still watching. Go to bed. But if you have any questions, stick around. And what do you guys think on this news?
Watching 59 likes. So thank you guys.
Yeah,
I muted myself. I was just saying there was a question that was asked very early on. I want to touch on if we have time, because someone had asked almost at the beginning of the video about why doesn't Adobe, it was Cardinal 15 photography. Yes, why isn't Adobe supporting Canon colors in Lightroom or Photoshop? And eventually specifically color profiles, and that's a question I would like to have answered myself, because I'm a Canon user and I shoot Lightroom and Photoshop. And to be honest with you, it's occasionally, or at least at the beginning, until I really figured out what I was doing in terms of the R5 and R6 files. That getting the best out of those out of the raw files was a little bit of a challenge until I started figuring out how to use the things like the calibration sliders in Lightroom, which I never really did. And that once I used that, that it really helped me get a lot of pop into images I was struggling to get out of the R5 and R6 raw files before. But you're right. I believe Capture One and some other applications support Canon colors better than Lightroom intuitively does, or Adobe, any of the Adobe products intuitively do. But I think if you're a skilled enough editor, you can work around it. But it would be good to just be able to, especially for people who work fast, work in bulk, commercial users, who don't have the time to fiddle around with one file for an hour like I do, to be able to just jump in and get the colors right the first time around. That would be a good thing, and hopefully they'll do that. I think it's just some kind of a proprietary thing between the two companies. It's not the first time that issue's happened. Before Canon say supported, or Adobe better supported, say the raw files for the older DSLR models. But now it's going through the same thing now with the R5 and R6, and I don't see any fast turnaround for that.
You know what? Adobe's always made some very feature-rich products, but the one thing I see Adobe is they're like this huge chain link truck that you see in Australia in the outback, the mining ones, where they're caravans, these trucks, these huge trailers, and it takes a while for them to do anything. I can't speak to the photo side as much, but on the video side, Adobe Premiere was the last thing I wanted to go with, just because it was slow, it was sluggish, you needed tons of RAM, you needed tons of processing capabilities, and even then it couldn't keep up with anything else out there. Because for me, on an Apple ecosystem, then Final Cut's my first choice because it's $300 and you pay it once. Right. And it's optimized for the hardware.
DaVinci's the same way. $300.
Exactly, same thing.
DaVinci, and if you want cross-platformable, or even on the Apple platform too, same price, $300. DaVinci's an incredible software. The only reason I don't have DaVinci is because when I was looking for an NLE, DaVinci wasn't an NLE. It was just a color correction package. So the nice thing about DaVinci 2 is if you're interested in trying it, they have a free version. I don't think you can do 4K, but try out the free version.
You can actually.
You can do UHD. You can't do DCI.
Oh well.
So you can definitely do it. The biggest difference though is the graphics accelerator, the GPU accelerator. So the performance of the studio is much better than the free version. Yeah. So if you're dealing with higher things with an R5 and you're dealing with those codecs, you definitely want to get the studio. I also want to just go back up to what you were talking about with the M1s. I'm really curious to see what they do because you could definitely see what you could do with an 8 gigabyte RAM, 16 gigabyte RAM, especially in Final Cut. But it's not perfect either because I've recently been editing a project in Premiere and in DaVinci Resolve, doing some of the editing, but really grading in DaVinci Resolve, and there was constant times where I had to force quit because I ran out of memory. Especially with DaVinci Resolve, I would just constantly be running out of memory. So hopefully we could see something like a 32 gig RAM for the max. I'm perfectly happy. Like this little gigabyte Aerial 15 has a 60. It's a laptop and it has 64 gigabytes of RAM. It handles everything I could throw at it with DaVinci Resolve, 8K, whatever. But in terms of the M1s, I'm really am very curious to see what the future is. I just hope they really do come with something more powerful soon.
James, you got to try this out. Get a demo copy of Final Cut because I kid you not here. I've never ran out of resources. I have on this hard drive, it's a 4 terabyte. This is my family film that I'm producing. It's currently 90 minutes long. It's the primary video source is 4K HQ, so that's minimum 470 megabits all I, and it's C-Log 3. I have multiple effects on it. I have color grading, color wheels, color curves, audio stuff, a whole bunch of stuff on there. And you know what? If I leave it in, you've got performance. There's two options: performance and quality. So usually when I'm editing, I leave it in quality. But when I want to preview full screen, I go in quality instead of performance. It doesn't drop a frame. It's incredibly fast, and I've even had no problem editing 8K video as well. Exporting takes time, so I think that's where you're seeing the synergies between the hardware and the software with Final Cut. And that's why I'm so shocked. Now, when it came to photo editing, like I said, I tried loading up about 15 RAW files, and it ran out of memory, and the software I was using choked. But loading 10 RAW files, no problem. But it's just, it shouldn't work.
I mean, it was designed to work. Like the M1 chips were designed to work with Final Cut, and that was great. I personally am just not a fan of the layout and the workflow of Final Cut. DaVinci has been my go-to for so long, but I say if anybody who likes the Final Cut and Final Cut workflow, I definitely say the M1 is the number one go-to choice. Ultimately, it's about what workflow works best for you.
Yeah, true enough. I agree. Mm-hmm. No, and rule of thumb when it comes to video editing, if you're going to be doing 4K, 32 gig is generally pretty safe. And even if your system can do it with 8, 32 is going to give you a lot more room because I like to have the NLE up and running. I like to have some editing software, the browsers, and a whole bunch of stuff. And I don't like to have to shut stuff down. Not that I do on this, and that's another thing I don't. But I still think, it's still safe to go with something like 32 gigs. I didn't buy this computer to do video editing. I sold my iMac Pro. I thought I was going to use this for a couple of months, and Apple was going to release new MacBooks. Global chip shortage changed that. We've only got about 5 minutes left. I want to give a chance for John and Brian to have some last words.
Well, this is, again, it's been a really fun time. I'm glad so much that you invited me on. It's always good to have a good discussion with like-minded individuals, and I see we've had a very interactive chat window. I wish we'd gotten to some more of the, questions and comments in here, but perhaps I don't know if there's any way that you can save those for later, Simon, or put something in.
We actually did cover them, and sometimes I responded as well. So you'd be surprised at how many times you were talking about something, and I'd flash up a comment that was related to what you were saying. So, like even Chris Thornton, who just asked about DJI Pro, Mavic Pro before Christmas, and I said, rumors aren't saying anything, Chris, and it's definitely possible. So I'll keep an eye on that. So.
Yeah, we did a good job. I'd comment on a couple of the chats also, just in terms of just being able to do it, do it on audio. But again, it's been a great time. It's fun. I'm looking at my R6. It's actually been blinking, overheating, warning for an hour, and it hasn't shut off. So, so it's working.
Yeah, and an R5 here, but then again, I'm using 4K mode, and it doesn't overheat. Right. So, Brian, last words from you.
Well, again, I thank you for having me on. My cat Dixie and I have had a great time. There she is. I always like talking about this kind of stuff, and I admit I feel a little bit bad because being a poor retail employee, I don't get to buy a lot of these fun toys, and every time I see
play with them all the time.
But I get to play with them all the time, which is fantastic. To me, the best gear that you could possibly have is the thing that you feel comfortable using, that you enjoy using, and that you know how to use well. Once you get those things, just be creative and have a good time. enjoy the world of photography, enjoy the world of videography, because that's how we see everything now. Before I got into photography, I don't think I saw the world properly. Once you get into it, you see light, you see shadow, you see texture, you see stories, you see all these other things. When you start to do that and you start to enjoy that world in that way, I don't know of anything that's better. So for all of your viewers that are watching who are in it for those reasons, thank you for being you. And Simon, man, super proud. I said it last time. Super proud of you. You're killing it. You're doing really well, and can't wait to see where you go from here.
Well, it's easy to kill it when I've got guests like you guys, right?
Oh, Muffin.
No, and you know what? I've said this before. You know, when you see some of the best shows and movies out there, it's not because of the stars. It's because of everybody working together. So having you guys on, it's a great collaborative effort, and I've really, really enjoyed it. And for you watching at home, thank you so much, because when I see you guys when I see you come in and watch, I mean, I've got as many as 67 viewers at one point concurrent, and that I think is a record for me. I really do enjoy this, and I thank you so much for taking your day. To Brian, thank you so much for, again, giving up a Friday evening. Same to you, John and James. You're always welcome here on The Ordinary Filmmaker. And for every week, I'm going to have different guests. It depends on if John or Brian or Stop the FOMO or James can show up. You never know who's going to show up on the channel, but we're going to discuss photo and video news of the past week. But on that final note, I bid you adieu and have yourself a great weekend. I hope, well, what do I hope? I hope...
Pandemic, schmandemic. Go out there and shoot something.
Yeah, no, I don't even want to talk about that. Pick up your camera, pick a lens, and I want you to think of what you're going to shoot this weekend. And just go out there and have a great time.
Pro wrestling. Shooting pro wrestling.
Pro wrestling,
Ooh.
All right.
Sure. Birds,
Tomorrow.
pro wrestling,
Sure.
cars.
That's why I've
Food.
got the D780. That's why I got the 70 to 200, the 2470. I cannot wait. Tomorrow's going to be awesome. Outdoor pro wrestling. And a week from today, if you are asking me back, unfortunately, I won't be able to come back next week because I will be up north on a private island in North Bay with my wife celebrating our anniversary. I can't wait.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Thank you. And I'll be using the Sony A7R4.
Yeah, man. Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. And I'll also be using the 14mm f1.8 that Sony's letting me use to do Astro and Stars. So I will have a little bit more firsthand experience on how amazing those things are after
Well, Brian,
next weekend.
As an ordinary filmmaker or photographer, whichever you choose, which hat you choose to wear, when you're up there, I don't want you to be thinking of me, but when you get creative, you know, if you want to have a short clip or something that you want to show on the next show you're here, I'd be happy to give you the floor and you can talk to it. And I think that'd be special.
Thank you. I will do that.
Wow.
All right.
Awesome as always, guys. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, after this is over, I'm going to unlist it. You'll still be able to watch it if you have the link, but then I'm going to cut it up and put it into separate video elements covering the R3, the Sony. So watch these videos come out Sunday, Monday, and as the week goes on in more bite-sized watchable moments. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. And if you've got any questions, drop them in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. Let's try this
Queen's
one.
wave.